an old man startles awake in the dark, sensing a presence. Moments later, a scream tears through the night as something crashes near a building, chaos erupting under a blood-red sky. A woman with long dark hair and glasses stares in recognition, whispering a name. Beside her, a boy with messy hair grins, arms behind his head. Between them, a white-haired youth watches, calm and unreadable. The story begins here, a tale of a boy branded as a failure, destined to rise from the bottom. 6 years old, he experiences the memories of another man's entire life in a single night, a stranger's existence from a world of cities, technology, and love. That other life ends in tragedy, sirens wailing as two figures fall through pouring rain, a desperate voice begging them not to die. He jolts awake in an unfamiliar bed, heart pounding, confused by what he just lived through. Airplanes, cars, computers, laws of physics taught in a university he never attended. Not a dream, memories vivid and complete. Tears fall down his cheeks, and he can't tell if he is grieving for the fiancé of a man who died, or mourning the loss of that entire vanished world. Morning comes. A servant enters with breakfast, addressing him formally as Master Arx. A knock interrupts the moment. Another figure arrives, dropping his tray onto the floor with contempt, addressing him only as former successor. Arx stares at the ruined meal in silence. He mutters the word former to himself. This is a country built entirely on the power of magic. His family, the Wraithefts, are an old and respected house of sorcerers, once celebrated for military service through magic. As the eldest son, he was expected to inherit that legacy, carrying his family's great expectations. 1 week earlier, in a moonlit forest, a small boy glows faintly, bracing himself for the ceremony that will decide his future, the measurement of his magic power. He runs to his parents, begging for another chance, promising he'll succeed. But the men behind them deliver the verdict. His vessel isn't fit for a future head of the family. His power is no greater than a commoner's. A hand reaches toward him, cold and final. His father's voice cuts through the darkness. He is being disinherited. His parents scream at him, calling him nothing but useless trash. His eyes go wide with shock, the weight of the words sinking in. Small and alone between his parents' towering forms, he speaks the truth that now defines him. He was disqualified. Back in the present, surrounded by toppled stacks of books in the family library, he searches desperately for any method to increase his magic power. No matter how much he reads, he finds nothing. The boy who once carried his house's expectations now carries only the memories of a dead stranger and a future he has to build from nothing. A young girl finds him buried among stacks of books, calling out to her big brother. He lies upside down on the floor, joking that the knowledge of a man in his 20s only amounts to this much studying. The girl, Laisha, bounces into the room asking if he is studying again. She begs to play, tugging at him, and he gives in, welcoming her with a tired smile. Laisha admits her mother told her to stay away from him. He asks quietly if that is true, already knowing the answer. She grabs onto him anyway, insisting she still wants to play with him no matter what she was told. She declares that she loves her big brother. He accepts it gently, ruffling her hair, grateful that at least one person in this house still looks at him without contempt. He reflects that Laisha is currently his only comfort in this house, the one person who still treats him the same as before. Their moment is interrupted. A group enters the room, led by a scarred, imposing man, his expression darkening the instant he spots Laisha there with him. Arx immediately steps forward and takes the blame, insisting it is entirely his fault, and that Laisha did nothing wrong, apologizing to his father and mother before a blow can even land. The apology doesn't stop it. He is struck and sent sliding across the floor, his face registering the impact without surprise, as if he expected nothing less. The man in the doorway roars that Arx has no right to get close to Laisha, the true successor of the family, warning him to know his place. Laisha rushes to his side, distressed at seeing him hurt, while he can only lower his head and apologize again. His father screams that his incompetence might rub off on her simply by being near her, treating his very presence like a contamination. The tirade continues, his father calling him nothing more than a piece of trash, a filthy dog unworthy of standing in the same room as the family. He is warned never to approach Riesha, the next heir. Again, his parents turn and walk away, his mother offering a quiet apology to someone unseen as the door slams. His father throws one last threat over his shoulder, promising that if this happens again, Arx will be used as a target for magic practice. Alone in the dark, he tells himself he should cool his bruised face down. Moments later, someone orders him to get up. Passing through the halls, he catches whispers from the servants and nobles around him, mocking his lack of magic power despite being a viscount's son, remarking on how badly beaten his face looks and gossiping that Laisha, though called his sister, is in truth only his cousin. He thinks to himself that it would be better if they simply threw someone like him out of the house entirely. He drags himself down a corridor, exhausted, and collapses against a door, sliding down it in silence, kneeling on the floor, scraped and worn down. He stares at his own hands, turning them over slowly, searching for something he cannot yet name. Shaken and holding back tears, he insists it is not a big deal at all. He forces out a laugh, brushing dust off himself as if nothing happened. He reminds himself that the man whose memories he carries lived through far worse hardship over 20 years. Scenes of that stranger's childhood flicker through his mind, boys running and playing in an ordinary world. He smiles through the pain, telling himself that if that man could endure his own struggles, then surely he can endure this too. The memory shifts to that other man's parents, gentle and worried, telling their son he doesn't have to go if he doesn't want to, asking if something happened at school. They promise they'll always be on his side, a hand reaching out to comfort him. A warmer memory surfaces, that man's own parents calling him close, wrapping him in an embrace, exchanging simple words of love as a family. Back in the present, tears stream down his face, the contrast between that borrowed warmth and his own reality crashing over him. Alone in his room, he curls up on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, his cries echoing through the empty space. Through his tears, he demands to know why he has to be treated so cruelly, just because he lacks talent for magic. He asks himself what he is even supposed to do about it. Face down and exhausted, a bitter thought creeps in. Maybe things would be better if he simply wasn't around at all. Another memory rises, that man is a boy, standing his ground in a narrow alley, facing down others despite being outmatched. The boy runs forward anyway, refusing to back down even knowing he can't win. Arx realizes the contradiction in himself, questioning why he is the one wallowing in misery, when even that ordinary boy chose to stand and fight. A fist clenches tight, trembling with resolve. A voice inside declares it will not lose, not this time. Tears still on his face, Arx rises with a new fire in his eyes. He vows that he will become a sorcerer no matter what, swearing to make his parents regret ever looking down on him, armed with nothing but stubbornness and the borrowed memories of a stranger's life. Arcus stayed buried in his room, surrounded by stacks of books, determined to prove his parents wrong after being cast aside for his weak magic. He studied through the night, absorbing the basics of magic, an ability built from words infused with power and spoken as incantations to bring ideas into form. He recognized something familiar in the glyph arts, symbols resembling the star constellations and planetary charts he remembered from his past life. Every incantation required the right words, the right magical letters, and the exact amount of power fed into each syllable for the spell to take shape. He also learned the danger of failure. Too little or too much power poured into a word, and the spell would collapse instead of activating. He reasoned that his memories from his past life could give him an edge in understanding the structure and meaning behind the incantations. Knowledge alone wasn't enough. No matter how he studied, he couldn't grasp the physical sense of channeling the correct amount of magic into each word. A commotion outside pulled him from his thoughts. He looked out the window to see what was happening below. A carriage had arrived, and a scarred, imposing man stepped out, greeting the household with a wide grin and calling out to Arcus by name. Arcus recognized him at once and ran to announce the visitor. His uncle Clave had come. Tea was served in the parlor. Arcus and his younger sister Lisha greeted their uncle, who remarked on how much the two of them had grown since his last visit. Lisha praised her brother's sudden aptitude for complicated words, surprising their uncle, Clave Arvent, their father Joshua's brother, who had also been disinherited from the Wraitheft family for insufficient magic power. Unlike Arcus, Clave had carved out a name for himself on the battlefield, earning a respected position in the military through sheer effort. His combat ability was rumored to surpass even Joshua's, a man whose magical power dwarfed his own. Their parents entered the room, stern and silent, and the children whispered that, if anyone could help Arcus now, it might be their uncle. Joshua and Clave exchanged a tense greeting, brothers who hadn't spoken in some time, the distance between them plain on their faces. The moment turned cold. A voice snapped at Arcus for daring to sit beside Lisha, and Joshua rounded on him, demanding he stay away from his sister. Clave rose sharply from his seat, shouting for it to stop, refusing to watch the scene continue. Josh confronted his brother for raising a hand against his own child. Joshua answered flatly that Arcus, lacking sufficient magical power, was no longer heir to the Wraitheft house. Lisha was the legitimate successor now. Clave absorbed the words with a hard stare. Lisha looked down, gripping the fabric of her dress tightly, caught between the brother she loved and the title now placed on her shoulders. Clave pressed his brother, pointing out Arcus was still only 6, too young for anyone to say for certain whether his magical power would ever grow or stay weak. Joshua snapped back, asking if Clave had forgotten what their own father's dying words had been. He insisted this wasn't like the falling out between the two of them years ago, declaring Arcus simply unfit to inherit the Wraithef name. Turning away, Joshua called his own son trash, no better than a stray dog, and stripped him of any claim to being his successor, or even his child. Clave's expression darkened as he asked if Joshua was really speaking that way about his real son. Before the argument could go further, a small hand shot up. Arcus stepped forward and declared he had something to ask of his uncle. He looked up at Clave and asked him directly to teach him magic. Joshua and the maid stared in disbelief, stunned that the boy would make such a request in front of everyone. Arcus pressed on, begging for guidance, insisting he wanted to learn from his uncle no matter what. He told himself he could no longer be the boy who only cried and stood still. He had to move forward. Clave studied him, noting the fire behind his eyes. Joshua cut in, demanding to know if his brother meant to drag the family's shame out into public view by agreeing. Arcus spoke up in his own defense, insisting he had never meant to disgrace anyone with his request. He argued that if he could prove himself capable, it would spare the family from any shame at all, rather than bring more. He turned to Joshua and addressed him directly as father, refusing to back down from the moment. Clave interjected lightly, reminding his brother that it hadn't actually been decided yet whether Arcus was a lost cause. Joshua barked out a laugh, mocking the boy for finally showing some backbone in front of him. Clave's smile turned pointed as he asked his brother whether his own accomplishments had ever brought either of them shame. He finally agreed, turning to Arcus with a grin and declaring he would forge him into a first-rate sorcerer. Arcus lit up, unable to contain his excitement at the promise. From that day, Clave Arvent began teaching him magic, warning him he was a strict instructor. Arcus bowed and pledged himself eagerly, and soon their outdoor lessons began, the boy shouting that he intended to become a splendid sorcerer and finally triumph over his parents. Clave led Arcus out into the woods and pointed toward a distant scarecrow, telling him to look closely at the target. Satisfied that the boy already had the basics down, he decided to skip straight to a demonstration. Clave raised his hands, power surging around him as he began the incantation, calling on the anger sleeping within his body to become fire, commanding it to raise a sound that would scorch the heavens and leave nothing behind. He unleashed the spell, sending a violent blast tearing through the air toward the target, the raw force of it lighting up the forest. Arcus stared in awe as the smoke cleared. Clave asked if he had seen it, grinning as he confirmed that was magic. Arcus watches a burst of offensive magic scorch the training field for the first time. His uncle stands nearby, having just cast the spell, and Arcus cannot hide his excitement at seeing real combat magic up close. His uncle turns to him with a confident grin, ready to begin proper training. He tells Arcus they will start with the basics, and Arcus swallows hard, nervous about what comes next. Without warning, his uncle jabs a finger toward Arcus' stomach. He names the technique plainly, magic power manipulation, the foundation of everything Arcus is about to learn. His uncle explains that if Arcus focuses on that same spot, he should feel something shapeless resting there. He tells him this connects to the measurement test Arcus already went through, and now they will review it properly. Arcus closes his eyes and concentrates. Magic power rises from his body, shifting between a gas and a liquid. He notes aloud that it feels warm unlike anything he expected. His uncle explains that mastering this while performing simple tasks at the same time is the mark of a first-rate sorcerer. Satisfied with the demonstration, he tells Arcus he has passed and can stop later. From a distance, someone's sharp eye catches sight of a window and the estate grounds beyond it. The scene shifts toward the manor, tension building around the moment. His uncle asks bluntly whether Lisha's bedroom is on the 3rd floor. Arcus is startled, confirming it while wondering how his uncle could possibly know that. His uncle raises a hand and explains that both humans and demon beasts carry magic power. Arcus's eyes widen as he puts it together, asking directly whether his uncle can sense other people's magic power. His uncle stands tall, hand raised with quiet pride. He reveals this is a magic power detection method he discovered himself, something entirely his own creation. Arcus is stunned, calling it incredible. Beside them, another boy reacts with equal disbelief. His uncle laughs, admitting the boys' rivalry runs deep. Arcus, standing in a swirl of magic power, states he has one question and declares he will master this ability no matter what it takes, refusing to let it be something he cannot do. He tells Arcus that if anyone might know something, it would be him, and asks whether there is a set standard for how much magic power should go into chanting a spell. Arcus gasps, unsure what answer is coming. His uncle's expression turns serious as he begins to reveal the truth, addressing Arx directly. His uncle raps him lightly on the head and gives his answer. It is intuition. Arx stares back, repeating the word slowly, struggling to process something so simple. Arx mutters that magic seems incredibly difficult. His uncle immediately corrects him, insisting this is only the tip of the iceberg. His uncle asks how Arx has been studying magic literature and the tales of the ancient arts all this time. Without warning, he tosses a stack of books toward him, telling him to catch them before they hit the ground. His uncle introduces the stack as the Index of Legendary Writings. He admits he has only read parts like dictionaries and history books, adding that if Arx is content staying an amateur, that alone would be more than enough. The 6 tomes are laid out, each holding a piece of the world's ancient history. The Sorcerer's Renaissance, the Creation Myth, the Prophecy of Kraki. Arx stares down at the books in his arms, gripping them tightly, absorbing the weight of everything he has just been handed. His uncle laughs, saying no human has ever fully deciphered these tomes. Arx reacts in shock, and his uncle adds that this is only what is said, since no one truly knows if it is even true. His uncle admits he himself has no idea what is written in one of them, especially the Prophecy of Kraki, where nearly everything remains undeciphered and illegible. He explains that using magic requires reading these tomes, but without understanding the origin and the setting behind the spells, their full power can never be drawn out. He piles even more books onto Arx, telling him the servants will bring the rest later. Struggling under the weight, Arx still manages a grateful thank you. Walking off with the stack, Arx quietly hopes he can somehow manage to decipher it all. Watching him go, his uncle remarks that the Index of Legendary Writings runs deeper than anyone realizes. His uncle adds that if Arx could accomplish that, his name would go down in history. He warns that the road ahead will be a thorny one, no question about it. Arx takes the words in silently, his expression steady despite the weight of what lies before him. His uncle tells him plainly that he won't let his efforts go to waste. Arx is caught off guard by the sincerity behind it. His uncle promises that anything related to magic can be left to him. Arx answers with enthusiasm, ready to take on the challenge. Alone afterward, Arx reflects that with this person's guidance, and the knowledge from his past life, raising his magic power might actually be possible. A month passes. Arx has read through several of the borrowed books, but has found no way to increase his magic power. He admits to himself that he was naive to think his past life knowledge would make this easy. He has been practicing a method called magic kneading, described in one of the books. Midway through, he grows uneasy, wondering if the amount of magic power he has is actually decreasing instead of growing. Something goes wrong. Arx is thrown backward, energy exploding around him as confusion crosses his face. Panicked, he wonders whether he should just let all the built-up power out, then immediately rejects the idea, sensing it would end badly. He clutches at the heat building inside him. Realizing the room has gone pitch black from how focused he was, Arx decides to ignore the strange sensation for now, telling himself it will settle if he just thinks about it later. Stepping out to find something to eat, he pauses, spotting his father standing nearby. His father notices him too, remarking that he must have been studying magic. Arx speaks up, saying a sorcerer's worth isn't decided solely by how much magic power they have. His father strikes him without hesitation, calling him a detestable child. Arx crumples from the blow, pain flashing across his face. Left alone on the floor, Arx sits in silence until his sister rushes to his side, worry in her voice as she asks if he is okay. She notices blood and cries out in alarm, tears filling her eyes as she realizes he is bleeding. Arx looks back at her, quietly saying her name. Lisha. Lisha apologizes through tears, saying it is her fault. Arx wipes at his own eye and tells her not to worry, insisting the amount of blood is nothing serious. She clings to him, sobbing that because she became the successor, he keeps getting in trouble and getting hit in her place. Through her tears, she says she just wants everyone to get along again, wishing they could all play together the way they used to. Arx holds her gently, telling her clearly that none of this is her fault. He wraps his arms tighter around her, his expression darkening as something inside him hardens. Rage builds behind his eyes. He admits to himself that he was too soft, thinking he only needed to prove them wrong. He realizes now that these people judge others solely by aptitude, which is why something as simple as Leisha's wish could never be granted. He vows silently that he will get them all back one day. Time then moves forward. 2 years passing in the quiet that follows. His uncle grins, telling him to show what he has got. Arx steadies himself and begins his chant, calling on the anger sleeping within his body. He continues the incantation, commanding it to raise a sound that would scorch the heavens and leave nothing behind, his hands glowing as he pushes the spell to its peak. The spell erupts to full form. Arx calls out its name, Flame Laroon, as the fire surges upward around him. His uncle watches with visible satisfaction, telling him it is looking good. Ark stands amid the fading light of his own casting, having grown stronger than before. He looks up calm and confident now, a quiet smile settling on his face as the wind from the spell still trails around his cloak. Arx, having learned far more about magic, continues to advance. He thanks his uncle sincerely, addressing him with warmth as the story closes for now, marked as to be continued. A merchant admires a lantern, praising the craftsmanship of its engraving. Inside his shop, he tells Arx that his engravings are always high quality. The scene reveals this is episode 4 of the series. Arx thanks the man, explaining that magic silver is essential for engraving work. The merchant hands over 2 pouches, covering both the material and the payment for the job. Arx beams as he holds the money, saying he looks forward to the next request. Walking through the city streets, Arx reflects that his collection of engraving techniques keeps growing. A closer look at the lantern shows it uses glitter glass, a common lighting and ignition tool found throughout the kingdom, made possible through magical engraving techniques. Arx explains that making these parts used to be how he earned money when he was struggling financially. Now in the city with earnings in hand, Arx decides to spend some of it on a new book and heads toward a shop. Without warning, someone shouts a warning at him. A commotion breaks out as another person crashes into him. A girl comes flying through the air, caught mid-motion as she collides with him. She quickly apologizes and asks if he is okay. Arx, catching his balance, asks who she is, before he can get an answer. 2 adults appear nearby, searching for the girl who has apparently run off from them. The girl grabs Arx's hand, suddenly. They duck into hiding as the 2 adults continue searching nearby, complaining about how hard she is to catch and worrying that the sun will set before they find her. Hidden together, the girl admits the chase made her heart pound. Arx notes that the pursuers seem to have finally left. She explains that she doesn't fully understand it herself. She was suddenly surrounded, but managed to slip through a gap between the people chasing her. Relieved, the girl thanks him for the help and introduces herself as Sue. Arx returns the greeting, introducing himself in turn. Sitting together against a wall, the 2 shake hands, sealing their new acquaintance. Arx suggests they use the opportunity to make their way to the main street before he finishes the thought. Sue asks which family he belongs to. Curious, since she hasn't seen him around before, Arx tenses up, sensing something is wrong. Sue pulls him toward the back of the alley, only for the hooded man to reappear ahead of them, having caught up faster than expected. She wonders if the back of the alley offers an escape route. The 2 walk further in, searching for a way out. The path ends in a dead end, leaving them trapped. Arx refuses to let the man take Sue, insisting they find another path. The man closes in, complaining that they've wasted his time. He steps closer, declaring he won't let them slip away again. Sue, startled, asks how he found her so fast. She realizes the man must have used magic to boost his physical abilities in order to track her down so quickly. The man confirms it with a smug grin, revealing himself as a sorcerer. Arx demands to know why he is targeting a child, calling him out as a kidnapper. The man admits it plainly, saying it is simply a way to make money, especially with a clever, valuable child like Sue. He turns his attention to Arx, sneering that he could fetch a good price too. Cornered against a wall with an adult sorcerer standing between them and the way out, the 2 children realize they are at a serious disadvantage. The man taunts them, saying he'll enjoy toying with them for the trouble they've caused. Sue decides to act, choosing a spell to use. The man, confident, assumes their age makes them easy targets and plans to exploit that. She invokes an original incantation, calling flame to form a binding rope with her power as its core. Arx realizes she is casting a spell of her own creation as the magic gathers into a violent surge around her. She shouts the final line, releasing the spell outward. The man reacts sharply, but shields himself just in time, deflecting the attack. His barrier, though hastily formed, holds. He mocks her, declaring her spell useless against him. Sue is stunned that it failed. The man admits he is impressed that a child could construct an original spell at all. He explains the flaw. Her chosen phrasing was mismatched, weakening the spell's effect since daytime casting reduces its power when tied to night-based imagery. He notes she is unusually sharp for her age, guessing she comes from a wealthy family, then turns to Arx, remarking that his rare silver hair alone would fetch a high price. The man mocks Sue for acting serious against kids, calling it childish after she just used a spell strong enough to shame adults. He warns that now that he knows Arx can use magic too, he won't hold back. Sue accepts that there is no other option left. She notices he is still underestimating them despite his warning and quietly hopes for a chance to create an opening. She warns Arx to cover his ears, telling him the next spell will be loud. She unleashes restraining chains meant to bind criminals. The man curses, refusing to let it take hold. while reacting with shock at the sheer amount of magic power behind the spell. The chains manifest as revolving footsteps burning across the sky above them. Arcs recalls that greedy collectors like this man care only about what they can seize, not the quality of what they take. He turns the moment to his advantage, calling forth a mechanical arm built from scavenged scrap, catching the man off guard. Sue watches as the towering construct of gears and debris rises above Arcs, amazed at the sight. Arcs names the attack scrap arm as the massive limb takes shape. The man scoffs, confident that the construct can't reach him from that distance. Arcs disagrees, launching the fist forward as a rocket punch aimed straight at him. The blow connects, sending the man crashing backward. Sue and Arcs stand together as the dust settles. Having turned the tables on their attacker, the fight continues. Amid a collapsing street, Arcs stands ready with his blade drawn, while Sue watches a group of thugs get thrown backward by an unseen force. Sue raises her arms in triumph, ready to celebrate. But Arcs stops her mid-cheer, warning her that declaring victory too soon is exactly the kind of thing that jinxes a fight. Sue looks puzzled by his superstition, until one of the fallen enemies groans and stirs, proving Arcs right. Celebrating early really did tempt fate. The chaos triggers a memory from Arc's past life, a fragment of knowledge from the world he once knew. The memory jogs something else in Sue's mind too. Her eyes widen as she suddenly recalls a detail about their enemy that she'd nearly forgotten. Sue rounds on Arcs, this time, not about the fight, but about something that happened earlier. She demands to know exactly how he pulled off the strange magic he used before. She presses closer, firing off questions rapid fire, especially fixated on the technique where he gathered a mass of rubble out of nowhere. Before Arcs can even begin explaining, Sue cuts him off again, insisting he teach her the trick immediately, so she can try it herself, practically vibrating with excitement. Their moment is interrupted. One of the downed enemies is still eyeing them, murmuring that they need to make sure the sorcerer among them is actually taken care of this time. Arcs moves quickly, deciding binding magic is the safest option to lock the enemy down before anything else goes wrong, while Sue checks in on whether the restraint is actually holding. It isn't. A larger, scarred enemy breaks free and lunges, grabbing Arcs by the collar and hoisting him up. He mocks Arcs for faking unconsciousness earlier, just to catch them off guard. Clearly irritated that his first job is turning out to be this much trouble, the brute notices Sue readying a spell and warns her off, pointing out that firing recklessly could just as easily hit her ally, who is currently being held as a human shield. Trapped and immobilized, Arcs is used as a shield to keep Sue from attacking, leaving her stuck and unable to make a move without risking his safety. Panic creeps in as Arcs searches desperately for any option left, aware that time is running out and that he might need to escape the grip entirely. Then it surfaces. That same intense burst of magic power he tapped into once before rushes back into his memory, sharp and unmistakable. Gritting through the enemy's tightening hold, Arcs decides there is no room left for hesitation. It is an all or nothing gamble now. He unleashes the built-up magic in a sudden violent burst, the force erupting from his body and catching his captor completely off guard. The enemy is sent flying backward, screaming, thrown clean off his feet by the explosive release of power. The dust settles over the wreckage as Arcs lies amid the debris, worn out but victorious, the fight finally broken in his and Sue's favor. Sue rushes to Arcs' side, calling out his name, relieved when he groans in response, while behind them the other man lies fully sprawled from the earlier blast. Arcs confirms the enemy is completely knocked out, and the group gathers around the unconscious figure buried in the rubble. Sue tries to explain what happened, but stumbles over her own words, insisting to no one in particular that it wasn't as strange as it sounded. Arcs cuts in to clarify that what launched the man was raw magical power, not anything embarrassing, while Sue scolds him to stop making it worse, worried it'll hurt her honor if he keeps going. An officer approaches, examining the restrained enemy, and remarking in disbelief that only 2 kids managed to take him down, calling it clearly a tough fight. Sue quickly corrects him, insisting it wasn't the 2 of them at all, that it was really Arcs alone who defeated their opponent. As they walk off afterward, Sue thanks Arcs again for saving her and formally introduces herself, and Arcs offers his own name in return. Sue reacts with surprise on learning his family name, asking if he means the well-known noble house, clearly impressed. Caught up in the moment, she reaches out and starts pinching his cheeks, cooing about how soft they are, leaving Arcs bewildered. Arcs asks if she even understands what being from a noble house implies, half expecting some dramatic noble-style threat from her in response. Sue immediately assumes he is imagining something about organ trading and swats the idea away, completely misunderstanding what he meant. The misunderstanding breaks the tension, and both of them end up laughing together, the awkwardness of the day melting into something lighter. Later, wandering through town, Sue brings up the topic again, asking him to teach her the magic he used earlier. At a food stall, Arx demonstrates a small trick with his magic, and Sue watches in amazement, insisting she tried to learn it herself before but couldn't manage it. She admits that Arx was even able to point out exactly what was wrong with her incantation, praising him again as amazing as night falls over the city skyline. Sue turns to him with a simple question, asking if he'll teach her the trick properly. Arx agrees, and Sue throws her arms up in excitement, thrilled that they'll be learning from each other going forward. As the day wraps up, Sue thanks him warmly for everything and tells him she'll be counting on him from here on, closing the chapter on a hopeful note. In his study, surrounded by stacked reference books, Arcus keeps a lantern burning late into the night. He sits hunched over his desk, sleeves rolled up, working a slender bar of metal between his fingers while his sister watches from her own chair nearby. Heat rises off the metal strip in his grip as he channels aether into it, the surface starting to warm and hum under the pressure of his focus. He notes to himself that kneading the aether before shaping it produces cleaner seals than his earlier attempts. And for the first time his results are holding steady instead of failing halfway through. His sister calls out to him, startling him mid-work. The sudden interruption sends him flinching backward, and his chair tips out from under him. The impact is loud enough to rattle the walls of the manor, a heavy crash echoing through the halls. She rushes to his side in a panic, apologizing over and over, insisting she never meant to scare him that badly. He waves it off, telling her the fault is entirely his own, that she only said his name and he overreacted. She apologizes again anyway, still shaken. Looking over the scattered mess on the desk, she offers to help him clean it up while he thanks her for the gesture. Setting the wreckage aside, he asks if she has made any progress with her own studies yet, taking a stack of her notes from her hands. She admits she hasn't learned any spells yet, having only just begun her magic lessons, though she guesses he must already know plenty by now. He downplays it, saying he only knows the basics, though he mentions their uncle pushed him hard enough that he can now cast Flammelaroon from memory without thinking about it. She lights up with admiration, declaring she'll work just as hard to catch up to him someday, sparkling with determination. Turning back to the desk, he says he'll have the spilled seals tidied up in no time, gathering the loose beads with a small flourish. As he pours them together, his sister notices something odd about the pile, remarking on how the sorcerer's silver looks like it is spreading further than it should. The little beads tremble and shake on the table, and both siblings lean in, delighted, comparing them to tiny eggs about to hatch. Arcus stops smiling. Sorcerer's silver isn't supposed to behave this way, and he realizes something he did while working. It must have changed its properties. He tries to reason it through, pointing out he never cast any actual spells on the material, only used it to carve seals as usual. Then it strikes him. The unusual reaction might be tied to the way he kneaded the aether before shaping it, a method no one else uses. Aether flares around his hand as he reaches toward the pulsing beads, his sister watching quietly beside him, both of them sensing that whatever he stumbled onto is far from ordinary. The beads stretch and swell under his touch, expanding far beyond their original size. He admits he can't even be sure this is still sorcerer's silver, wondering if it is turned useless. While his sister marvels at how much it has grown and questions what good an expandable liquid could possibly serve. Staring at a thermometer hanging on the wall, the word settles in his mind: expansion. He names it, outright, a thermometer. Grabbing paper and pen, he sketches out the idea at speed, sending his sister into confusion as the scratching of his quill fills the room. She asks what he is planning to make, and he tells her he is requesting materials from their uncle, still scribbling notes. He promises her it will be something she is certain to love. Outside the manor gates, morning light spreads over the rooftops while inside, fists pound against a locked door, calling for their uncle to wake up. The maid pleads with him to stop, explaining that Mr. Abend is still resting, but Arcus keeps pounding anyway. Inside, their uncle groans awake, irritated at being roused so early and demanding to know what all the noise is about. He grumbles that anyone banging his door down better have a war to report, while Arcus admits he is hungover, and the maid apologizes for failing to stop him in time. Arcus asks the maid to step out of the room, prompting his uncle to needle him about the dark circles under his eyes. His uncle asks why he is being so formal, all of a sudden, sitting up shirtless on the edge of the bed. Arcus holds up the glass tube and asks him to look. His uncle squints, recognizing it as the same tube he'd sent over recently, now marked like some kind of scale. Arcus tells him to watch and see. Releasing a burst of aether, he explains he came up with this recently, and asks his uncle to observe what happens to the sorcerer's silver inside. The liquid inside the tube shoots upward instantly, and his uncle's eyes widen at the sight of it actually moving. Though he mutters it looks more like some kind of toy, Arcus turns to face him directly, confirming his uncle's suspicion outright, that this is exactly what he thinks it is. A tool built to measure aether with precision. His uncle demands to know if this was really something he came up with on his own. Arcus admits it happened mostly by accident. Rubbing his temple, his uncle admits, there is no known method anywhere. He has traveled to measure aether with any accuracy, calling it a potential discovery of the century. Arcus lights up, insisting this could push all of mankind's understanding of magic forward. His uncle asks him plainly what he intends to do with it. Arcus answers that he has no wish to keep it hidden, that he means to share it with the world, but only once he can time the reveal carefully. His uncle presses him, asking if he is really sure, pointing out he'd hold a massive advantage over the entire world if he simply kept the discovery to himself. Arcus refuses outright. He argues that someone will inevitably find out and try to claim it as their own, and that going public offers far more to gain, his name and fortune secured while serving his country in the process. His uncle ruffles his hair hard enough to make him yelp, praising him for the decision. Grinning, his uncle tells him he has got real foresight for someone his age. Arcus fidgets, asking what he should tell his friends about it. His uncle waves him off, saying he doesn't need to say anything, only to keep the ethometer quiet until everything is properly in place for the announcement. His uncle stops short, surprised, asking if he actually has friends. Arcus insists that of course he does, recalling it afterward. Arcus notes dryly that this was exactly how he ended up enlisting his uncle's help, since asking twice clearly wasn't going to happen. Together they work out the details, sketching a design on paper while his uncle stands over a desk lined with vials and tools, reviewing the plan. His uncle arrives with a case full of clinking glass tubes, and Arcus reacts with a jolt of nervous energy, throwing himself into work through the night and into the next morning without rest. Standing beneath the open sky with cloak flaring behind him, he channels his focus into the object in his hands, murmuring under his breath that it must move according to his will. He names the technique aloud, psychokinesis, and the wind answers him, an object lifting and cutting through the air exactly as he commands. Staring at what he has done, he can barely believe it, breathless at the realization that it actually worked. Holding up the finished tool, he declares it done. Narration confirms it. The ethometer has finally been completed. His uncle claps a hand to his chest, declaring that his name is about to go down in history, laughing that the kid really is something else. Slumped back in his chair afterward, Arcus catches his breath, still holding the device loosely in his hands. He decides what comes next, that he needs a powerful spell of his own, certain it will push his magic studies forward by leaps and bounds. He reflects that this world isn't nearly as peaceful as the one he remembers, recalling a kidnapper he barely managed to handle in the city. He resolves that he needs a spell built for real defense, something he can rightly call his own trump card. Thinking it over, he wonders what could be more original than borrowing from the knowledge of the man he once was, before pointing forward and declaring the answer out loud: a gun. Looking down at what he is holding, he admits it leans dangerously lethal for a world that won't pull its punches in return, since firearms don't exist here. He settles on a name for the spell, Black Bullet, describing it as something meant to rip through the air faster than sound and tear apart the wind itself. His first test falls flat. The projectile drifts lazily toward a homemade target, and his uncle mocks him for it, asking why something meant to be faster than sound is crawling through the air instead. Arcus admits something's clearly wrong. Frustrated, he grips the railing, insisting there is no problem with his wording, that the phrase, Black Bullet itself can't be the issue, given its origin describing metallic sling stones, once used to shoot down beasts that ravaged villages in the spiritual age. Flipping back through his notes, he realizes his mistake lies elsewhere, in the line describing it ripping through air faster than sound and tearing apart the wind. That is where the real problem sits. He recalls a spell he'd seen used before, one built around the word incinerate, a term often used to strengthen fire-based magic, but stumbles on how the same word shifts meaning entirely when paired with the phrase, incinerate, the darkness. He reasons that a single phrase can carry several distinct effects, depending on how it is used within the old chronicles. Pulling a passage from the Magician's Elegy, he studies its layered meaning. On the surface, a call to burn something to cinders; underneath, a plea to resist the darkness of night. Clutching his head, he realizes the language works exactly like the language of his old world. One phrase capable of holding 3 separate meanings depending on where. Surrounded by 6 volumes of the Elder Tongue, he lays out his goal plainly. He is recreating a gun, and what he needs now is a phrase that can be spoken anywhere and guarantees an instant kill. He pulls a heavy tome from the shelf, its cover etched with a woman's portrait titled The Spiritual Age. Flipping through its pages with sharp focus, he notes that the events recorded here closely resemble the myths and legends of the man's world, and he suspects he might be onto something. If he is reading it right, his eyes widen. He has found it. Standing before a row of targets, cloak snapping in the wind, he speaks the phrase aloud, invoking the black bullet, calling on the pale horse to keep galloping across the skies in the blink of an eye. He finishes the incantation, naming it the Eye of Death, and unleashes it toward the target. The bullet tears forward with a sharp whistle, slamming dead center into the target and cracking it on impact. He stands afterward with quiet intensity, the spell's afterglow still curling around his fingers, a technique now fully his own. His uncle leaps up applauding, praising the display as fine magic, before catching himself and casually mentioning he has got some good news to share. Arcus hesitates, uneasy, admitting he doesn't like the sound of that. Right as his uncle says the timing finally feels right, and moves to introduce him to someone. A tall, sharp-eyed woman in a dark coat is presented as his new attendant, leaving Arcus stunned, barely managing to stammer out the word before trailing off in disbelief. Crabe brings a stern man in a sharp suit before Arcus, announcing he is to be Arcus's new attendant. Arcus stares up, wide-eyed, while the newcomer studies him with a quiet, unreadable expression. Arcus bristles with jealousy, sparks flying off him, as he watches everyone react to the attendant's striking looks. The comment, "Drop, dead gorgeous," lands, and Arcus can't hide his sour mood. The attendant lets out a dry sigh, unimpressed at being handed off to someone new so suddenly, and a child at that. Arcus, confused, wonders aloud if he did something wrong. The attendant admits it isn't wrong exactly, just highly unpredictable, letting the words hang with clear reluctance. Crabe laughs off the tension, telling Arcus that since his new attendant is sharp-witted, Arcus shouldn't feel bad about giving him a hard time. The attendant only lets out a long, weary breath. The attendant bows formally before Arcus, introducing himself as Noah in vain and thanking Crabe for the introduction. Noah straightens and declares he looks forward to serving him, addressing him properly as Master Arcus. Caught off guard by the formality, Arcus stumbles over his words before managing an awkward, but genuine greeting in return. Noah quickly backpedals, asking Arcus not to feel obligated to address him so formally either, given the circumstances. Arcus points out he has technically been disinherited, so such courtesy feels unnecessary. Noah counters that being overly formal with one's own servant can invite ridicule from others. Noah adds that the larger issue is what Arcus intends to do going forward, letting the question sit heavily between them. Arcus hesitates, eyes flicking away, mumbling an uncertain response before Noah simply agrees to accept things as they are for now. Noah says the pleasure is entirely his, and Arcus, fired up, declares he is glad to be working with him. Crabe announces to a startled bystander that Noah will be serving his nephew, starting that very morning, brushing off the lack of explanation with a casual thanks. Arcus turns to Noah, worried about whether it is really fine for him to leave Crabe's side, remarking how in sync the two seem. Noah simply notes that Crabe never warns anyone before making decisions. Summoning questions if the sudden reassignment is really no trouble, and Noah affirms it isn't, adding that change can be exciting. Arcus realizes that is exactly why Noah agreed to the arrangement, having been promised a livelier post. Noah confirms it, saying he became Crabe's servant in the first place, because he knew it wouldn't be boring. Noah smiles faintly, satisfied that the reasoning alone was more than enough to justify the choice. Crabe teases Arcus for being unexpectedly entertaining, laughing as Arcus reacts with flustered shock. Crabe remarks that Noah could have chosen any post he wanted, but decided to tag along with Arcus instead. Noah objects mildly to being called weirdo, while Crabe assures Arcus he can trust Noah completely. Noah is introduced as the Winter Wonderkind, a nickname earned during his student days for his love of ice magic, his sharp intellect, and his good looks. His skills stretch across magic, rapier fencing, and stewardship, with deep knowledge of Liner's history and etiquette among his strongest subjects. Noah thanks Crabe for the introduction but insists his talents should speak for themselves. Arcus, impressed already by his background, eagerly asks to see them in action, and Noah agrees without hesitation. Noah raises his hand, telling Arcus he'll demonstrate one of his favorite spells. Arcus lights up, thrilled at the chance to watch. Noah begins chanting, his incantation calling on ice to rise from the depths of a glistening hell, freezing the world under a chilling wind. He continues, commanding the spell to shatter chariot wheels and bring soldiers to a halt, his focus unwavering as the magic circle beneath him churns. The ground around them erupts in cracking ice, spreading rapidly across the courtyard. Arcus watches in awe as the frost overtakes the earth, calling it amazing. Noah names the spell his freezing gale, addressing Arcus directly as the ice settles. He explains that he developed it from Icy Breeze, a spell meant to slow down advancing enemies. Arcus reacts with starstruck admiration, asking if Noah invented it himself. Noah, confused, asks what he means. Arcus explains he is recording the amount of aether the spell consumes. Arcus proudly holds up a slender measuring device, explaining he gauged the spell's aether cost using it, noting the unit of measure is called mana. Noah stares back, caught completely off guard by the unfamiliar concept. Opens with steel meeting steel. Arcus charges down a slope toward his opponent, swords clashing in rapid succession as the manor rooftops loom behind them. The exchange grows fierce. Arcus pushes through the block and shouts his refusal to yield, while his instructor watches from the side, arms folded, calm and unreadable. Blades lock again, sparks fly as the two fighters strain against each other, neither backing down in the standoff. The bout ends abruptly. Arcus lands hard on the ground, sword knocked away, breathing heavy as his opponent stands over him. His instructor calls the match, marking the 10th round complete. Arcus grumbles about losing yet again, frustration written across his face. She breaks down his mistakes plainly. He overreaches with techniques his body isn't ready for, and plans too far ahead for his own good. Arcus protests that he can't even land a single hit. Watching two older swordsmen train nearby, Arcus admits the truth to himself. He is trying to replicate movements from his old life inside a child's frame, and until he grows, the gap will remain. Later his instructor considers him carefully, recalling everything she has taught him: swordsmanship, magic, academics, and how quickly he has absorbed it all. But one thing stands out above the rest: the device he built, the ethometer. She asks directly where he got the idea for something she has never seen before. Arcus answers simply that he made it himself. He clarifies further his uncle only helped finalize the design, but the core work was his. She stares down at him, stunned that a child built it on his own. Arcus explains his next goal: gathering data to prepare for the ethometer's public release. His instructor offers her help without hesitation. He lays out his plan. He wants to record the mana cost of every spell he can cast, publishing some sample figures while keeping his true techniques private. The data will also refine his own spell designs. Nearby, another figure notices him and calls out, addressing him formally as Master Arcus. She studies him with open curiosity, remarking that he has turned out even more interesting than she expected. An older man laughs boisterously, teasing that he hasn't seen her this animated in years. Proof. He says that Arcus really is something special. Someone else offers up spare ethometers without needing to be asked twice, prompting a quiet aside about how eager Arcus seems to get his hands on more. The girl in glasses promises discretion, framing her silence as simple loyalty to her role as his servant. She teases him under her breath, then denies saying anything when he notices, brushing off his question with a flat response. 3 ethometers are presented to him at once, catching him off guard with the number. He is told they each measure different amounts and gradations of aether. Arcus reacts with surprise, realizing there is more than one type to account for after all. His instructor's low, unsettling laughter fills the air, calling the readings a marvel, while a dark aura seems to build behind her. Arcus watches nervously, unsure how to respond. Despite having a child's body now, Arcus feels he ought to carry himself with more competence. She counters that nothing fascinates a magician more than daily ethometer records, like the ones she has been keeping on herself. Calling him a fascinating young man, she turns away just as Arcus loses his footing and crashes to the ground behind her. Startled back to attention, Arcus remembers something important. His instructor reminds him it is time to prepare for his next engagement. They arrive at the Magician's Guild, where she informs him his meeting is with a man named Crabe Abend and 2 others. Inside, a guildmaster reserves a soundproofed room, explaining he wanted to guarantee complete privacy for whatever plot Crabe is hatching. This time 2 guild officials size up the situation. One simply tells the other to explain what he knows about their guildmaster's dealings. He admits he hasn't heard of any notable research coming from Crabe recently, then wonders aloud whether the 2 servants accompanying him might be the ones with actual ideas. The door creaks open to introduce Godwald Sylvester. Watching closely, one of the officials suspects Crabe really is up to something. A young servant girl yelps and flinches dramatically at the sight of him, stammering nonsense while Arcus looks on, confused by her reaction. Godwald reassures her. It is fine. She bows repeatedly, apologizing for her outburst. Frozen in place, she continues apologizing, clearly mortified by her own behavior in front of him. Crabe jokes to Godwald that he isn't nearly as intimidating as he looks, chuckling along with another man beside him. Godwald asks if the boy is Crabe's nephew, only to be corrected he is actually his nephew, not his daughter. The guildmaster snaps, demanding to know why Crabe brought his own child along in the first place. Arcus introduces himself formally as Arcus Raytheft. Crabe remarks offhandedly that his outfit makes it obvious he is a boy, prompting Godwald's visible shock at the mix-up. Crabe pushes forward impatiently, asking what exactly is going on and cutting straight to business. He snaps at the interruption just as a maid stumbles into the room, timidly addressing Godwald by name. He asks what is wrong. Trembling from head to toe, she begs him not to kill her. Clearly terrified, Godwald shouts for her to speak clearly. She stammers, unable to get the words out, while the others in the room stare in stunned silence as she throws herself down, pleading for her life. Chaos erupts as she wails for her mother, while Crabe questions what he is supposed to do about the scene. Arcus, horrified, accuses Godwald of planning to bury her alive in concrete and dump her in the sea, demanding he stop immediately. The maid's outburst quiets down as another servant wheels in a cart, cheerfully announcing tea and sweets brought along for the young visitor, apologizing for the interruption while explaining she was sent with documents. Arcus mutters that he isn't particularly fond of sweets, unimpressed by the generous offering. The room settles. Crabe remarks that Arcus is a bit unusual, and Godwald agrees, noting how strange it is for someone his age to carry himself the way he does. Godwald finally turns to business, producing something from the case with a creak, ready to reveal the reason they've all gathered. He sets the athometer down and tells the guildmaster to take a look at it directly. He explains plainly what it is: a device that accurately measures aether. The guildmaster asks what exactly it does. Stunned, he demands Godwald repeat himself, unable to believe a device could actually measure aether. Godwald insists it is no trick. He points out the reactive substance at the base of the tool, explaining how it genuinely responds to aether exposure. He describes how the substance expands the more aether it absorbs, growing visibly the greater the exposure, confirming that it isn't simple movement but real measurement. Pressed on whether he invented it, Godwald admits he only helped. The true credit belongs to someone else in the room. The guildmaster is floored to learn the boy standing quietly nearby, who looks no older than 10, is the one responsible for the creation. Godwald adds that he wasn't fully convinced himself at first, but now the plan is to make the invention public eventually. He explains the device's extreme sensitivity, able to pick up even the faintest traces of aether with precision. Its range, however, is limited, likely shorter than the very room they're sitting in, though its accuracy still marks it as groundbreaking. The guildmaster acknowledges the potential profit such a device could bring to their country. He adds that they have every right to keep the discovery to themselves if they choose, then asks directly whether they're certain they want to proceed with making it known. Crabe turns the question to Arcus himself, noting that the boy has already made up his mind, while the guildmaster presses further, asking exactly what Arcus hopes to gain from announcing his creation to the world. Inside a guild office, a rough-looking man leans over his desk, telling young Arcus that a magician's two truest loves are money and knowledge, calling himself proof of the type. He adds that while Arcus fits every mold of a typical magician, the boy himself is anything but typical for his age, leaving Arcus visibly nervous. A woman nearby grins, remarking that Arcus has already started creating his own original spells, having approached the man out of nowhere asking to be taught magic. The narration explains that crafting an original spell is normally one of the final graduation trials at the Royal Institute, something fewer than 1 in 10 students manage. Hands trembling around his cup, the guildmaster admits the only other child he knows capable of something like this is the prince himself, though he notes Arcus looks more like a mild-mannered girl than a prodigy. He studies Arcus quietly, calling him a genuinely astonishing young man. Later, alongside the king, the guildmaster is asked whether His Majesty has been informed about a new invention referred to as the aethometer. The king waves the question off, saying he'd rather skip the tedious talk of production targets and outside contracts entirely. The guildmaster chuckles, guessing the king simply doesn't want to be bothered, while the king teases that Arcus might be annoyed at not being told first. Arcus, flustered, is stunned to learn just how casually the king speaks about himself. His companion jokingly asks if the king isn't worried about being executed for treason for talking that way, only for the king to shrug it off. The king reminisces about their younger days, admitting they used to sneak out of the palace and run wild through town together, much to the guildmaster's visible embarrassment. With business settled, the king promises to notify Arcus once a date is chosen for the announcement, then hands over a small item as a parting reminder. Playfully, the king declares it a gift of thanks for the meeting, urging the guildmaster to keep it for himself, who simply grumbles that the joke isn't funny. Alone afterward, the guildmaster grips the item tightly, calling it something meant for the king, not himself. He and the king share a serious, silent exchange, both acknowledging the gift is meant for royalty alone. Later, in a sunlit courtyard by a fountain, a familiar voice calls out Arcus's name. Sue comes bounding over cheerfully, excited for another study session together, greeting Arcus warmly. Her mood shifts instantly when she notices a mark on his cheek, and she realizes his family stripped him of his inheritance. Arcus admits he has grown used to being struck, though he agrees it is still a shocking thing to witness, while Sue furiously demands to know what gives anyone the right to hit him daily. She presses further, pointing out how strange it is that his weak aether led to disinheritance. Arcus quietly deflects, simply thanking her for caring. Sue tells Arcus that despite everything, she doesn't see him as so different from any other magician out there. He explains that his uncle once told him some officials carry even less aether than he does, and that simply being able to use magic at all is already remarkable in their world. Sue presses further, asking why he is pushing himself so hard if his ability is decent by normal standards. Arcus admits that compared to other wraithefs, other nobles, it still falls short, and that alone was reason enough for his family to cast him out. She argues that since he is no longer the heir, he doesn't owe magic anything anymore, insisting she'd have abandoned it out of spite in his position. Arcus hesitates before answering honestly that he wants to become a famous magician just to prove his family wrong. Sue blurts out that his motive sounds childish, then immediately regrets her bluntness, apologizing and admitting she expected something deeper. Arcus quietly agrees that his reasoning probably isn't a particularly noble one after all. He privately wonders if revenge has simply been the fuel keeping him moving, and questions whether even success would satisfy him, or if it would just lower him to their level. Sue cuts back in, insisting his reason isn't wrong at all, that it is far better than giving up and doing nothing. She points out he could have easily run from his problems instead, but chose to keep going, which she frames as real progress. Arcus repeats the words, surprised, as she continues that he could have asked his uncle to keep him isolated from everyone he resents. Yet he didn't take that easy path. She calls that choice genuinely impressive. Arcus considers her words, admitting that maybe that is one way to look at his situation after all. Sue adds that his goal shouldn't stop at revenge alone, urging him to aim higher. Arcus asks if she is serious, and she cheers loudly, praising him as amazing. Sue declares that a person should always dream big. Arcus wonders aloud whether setting a bigger goal is meant to keep him from burning out once he actually achieves what he wants. Sue declares his current ambition simply isn't good enough, and asks whether becoming a state magician would satisfy him instead. Arcus protests that there are only 11 state magicians in the entire country, questioning how that isn't already an enormous goal, especially given his uncle's own title. Sue insists life becomes far more enjoyable when a person sets massive goals, then wonders if he could aim even higher, perhaps toward becoming a general or a top-ranking noble instead. Sue tells Arcus he just needs to do something that leaves everyone stunned, insisting that would be enough to earn him a peerage of his own. Arcus admits that kind of achievement feels far beyond his current reach. Undeterred, Sue declares she has more than enough life experience to know exactly how amazing he really is. She frames it as the kind of lofty ambition he ought to chase, while Arcus quietly points out she is barely a year older than him. Sue counters that a year is still a long stretch of time, stretching proudly as she says it. Arcus relents, agreeing he'll simply do his best, and Sue promises to cheer him on the whole way. She insists she is 9, not 8. Reminding him firmly that she is still older, then declares that anyone chasing big dreams needs to seize every opportunity and stay greedy. She turns the question back on him, asking if he has any plans of his own for the future. Curious, Arcus leans in, smirking as he asks whether she means something as grand as big plans. Sue answers plainly that she wants to make their country strong. Strong enough, she adds, to overpower anyone who might dare stand against it. She explains that their nation is constantly threatened whenever it takes even a small step past its borders, with the empire always eager to provoke conflict and stir rebellion among the nobles within. She continues listing threats, from tribes beyond the eastern mountains to the maritime nations to the south, all of whom look down on their kingdom. Arcus, caught off guard by her sudden shift in tone, quietly says her name in surprise. Sue immediately breaks character, laughing that she was only quoting something she'd read from a book. Arcus remarks that it sounds like she believes their people have endured serious oppression, though Sue insists she wouldn't put it quite that strongly herself. Trying to change the subject, Arcus asks her to guess what an odd object poking out of his pocket might be. Sue notices it immediately and asks what it is for. She jokingly guesses that the tube from the frame is meant to be inserted somewhere embarrassing, leaving Arcus stunned by her guess. He clarifies that it is actually called an athometer, a device built to measure aether, insisting she should be far more impressed than she seems. Arcus firmly holds the device out of reach, insisting he plans to release it publicly, and can't just start handing out copies before the announcement is ready. He hands the athometer over to her anyway, and Sue realizes he means it is tied to the massive ambitions he'd spoken about earlier. She laughs happily, only for Arcus to demand she let go of him after she gets too clingy. Startled and thrilled, she asks if he is serious, and Arcus mutters that she can use it whenever they're together in the meantime. Sue tackles him in an excited hug, cheering that he is the best. while Arcus grumbles about her doing it again, secretly caught off guard by how affectionate she is being. 2 years pass, and the grand hall of the Wraitheft estate glitters under rows of chandeliers, as opens on a lavish gathering. Guests whisper among themselves as a young woman crosses the hall. They recognize her as the Wraitheft heiress, noting how she has grown into a fine, gifted lady. A noble points her out to his companion, warning him to pay close attention, since the girl beside her belongs to the richest man in the kingdom, Lord Ka Gaston. The heiress is introduced as Lesia Wraitheft. Lesia's father calls her name. She responds obediently, addressing him as father. Lord Gaston greets the Wraitheft family warmly, telling Lesia she has grown as beautiful as a flower. She thanks him bashfully. Lesia's father states that he and his daughter have long awaited Gaston's arrival. Another guest is introduced as Count Purse Cremelia, head of a military family that commands all the eastern houses and stands beneath the Wraitheft family's authority. Another young woman, Charlotte, approaches and greets Lesia warmly. Lesia quietly asks her where Arcus is, drawing attention to his absence. Charlotte hesitates, then tells her lord that Arcus is not in attendance, letting the rumors about him hang unspoken. Lesia's father turns to Lord Gaston and formally announces his intention to end his son's engagement to Gaston's daughter. Gaston asks whether this decision is connected to his son's expulsion, while Lesia and Charlotte react with visible shock nearby. Lesia's father explains that as a military family, the Wraithefts require their heir to meet a certain standard, and that Arcus's weak aether has become a disgrace to the family name. Gaston remarks that the situation sounds very familiar, then catches himself and apologizes for the outburst. Still, Letia's father insists on canceling the engagement so as not to put Gaston in a difficult position. Gaston thanks him for his consideration. Gaston turns to his daughter, Charlotte, explaining that the arrangement was mutually agreed upon, and given her hesitation, suggests they honor Lord Wraithefts' wishes. Gaston presses further, asking about Arcus's expulsion, but Lesia's father deflects, saying the decision belonged to his brother. His hand clenches as Gaston mentions hearing that Arcus is now under someone named Crucible's guidance. Gaston notes that this person sympathizes with the boy, but assures the Wraitheft patriarch that Arcus will gain nothing from it, his expression sharpening with irritation. Elsewhere, a new arrival announces that everyone has gathered, signaling the start of another event. A commanding figure descends a grand staircase to booming fanfare, introduced as Lord Gaston Marquis, drawing the attention of the entire hall. He declares the event as wondrous as he imagined, while other nobles fawn over him, insisting he must attend their luncheon. He greets Cremelia warmly, glad to see him enjoying the gathering, while another lord thanks him for the generous invitation to such a sublime event. Lord Gaston laughs, saying he simply likes to keep good relations with the eastern houses and invites everyone to enjoy themselves. Nearby, a noble bows and expresses delight at receiving his invitation. Lesia and Charlotte exchange a glance. Lesia asks quietly if that is really so, and Charlotte murmurs that many unsavory rumors surround the Marquis as they step away from him. Charlotte reflects on Lord Ka Gaston, whose title and influence over national financial affairs afford him great status. Gaston booms out another toast to his guests, urging everyone to keep up appearances and enjoy the wine he has prepared for the evening. Charlotte remarks under her breath that it is awful, yet she still came. The two girls slip quietly away from the crowded hall, moving past the other guests and out toward a quieter part of the estate. Outside on a balcony away from the noise, Charlotte finally relaxes, saying at last she can breathe. She adds that the citizenry foot the bill for these gatherings through their taxes and doubts they could stand it for long. Lesia agrees that her parents call these events important, but admits this one is especially raucous. Lesia asks bluntly if it has to do with the Marquis's corruption. Charlotte answers coldly that to men like Gaston, the common people are nothing more than pigs and cattle, as the party continues in the background. Charlotte changes the subject, praising Lesia's brother as a marvel. Lesia looks confused for a moment before Charlotte asks eagerly what Arcus is really like. Charlotte continues, saying he never fails to surprise her, and that his work inspires her to try harder, even as she studies magic herself, and admits she cannot approach his skill. Lesia smiles, concluding simply that he must be hardworking. Charlotte presses further, wondering aloud what kind of man would interest Lesia, guessing it must be someone strong. Under the heading Feminine Beauty, Lesia declares that a gentleman must be strong, comparing the ideal build to her brother's own physique, and says she wouldn't tolerate someone scrawny. Charlotte laughs, saying she sees now, amused by Lesia's certainty. Lesia admits she would miss her brother if he left the estate too soon, though she quickly adds, with some embarrassment, that she is also relieved by the thought. Their conversation is cut short by a rustling sound. Someone calls out to the girls, saying he ought to think of Lesia's happiness, startling them both. A nervous man in formal dress approaches, holding a heavy case in his arms. He apologizes for the interruption, introducing himself as a representative from the Royal Ministry of Justice. He holds the case out toward them, asking if they would hold on to it for him. Puzzled, the girls stare at the case as he sets it down. In the next moment, the scene shifts to the grand silhouette of the Wraitheft estate itself, looming under the darkening sky. Clutching the case tightly, Lesia races through the halls, footsteps echoing as she runs to find her brother. A servant named Noah greets her, calmly informing her that Master Arcus is in his room before Lesia cuts him off, panting, and asks where her brother is. She bursts through the door, calling out for her brother. Inside, a study lined with books. Arcus sits at his desk, examining a vial of liquid, surrounded by notes and experiments. He looks up cheerfully as the door creaks open, greeting Lesia and asking if she enjoyed the party. A mustached lord stormed through his estate, sweat beading on his brow as he barked about missing paperwork. His hooded aide reported that the missing documents were financial records, hinting at corruption within the household. The lord demanded to know how this could happen. Moments later, the aide added one more detail: a secret ledger had vanished too. The lord's expression darkened. He pressed for details, and the aide confirmed. The ledger had likely been stolen during a recent party. A suspect had already been detained for questioning, but suspicion soon shifted elsewhere. Witnesses reported that the daughter of the Wraitheft household had been seen leaving the party carrying a black case that didn't match her outfit. The lord, agitated, grumbled about the rigid nature of the Eastern military houses, and insisted that Wraitheft could not be allowed to report anything to a woman named Cremelia. He ordered his men to quietly bring the Wraitheft girl to him. Rather than confront her outright, he wanted her persuaded to return the case. He assured his aide it would be handled gently before the scene cut to his sprawling estate, looming under a night sky, as word of a secret ledger spread. Elsewhere, a boy discovered the ledger in his own hands and reacted with alarm, questioning why something so important would be handed to a child. The boy pressed further, asking whether the man who gave it to her had said anything. She recalled his instructions clearly. She was told not to tell her father. The boy asked what she intended to do with it. The girl explained she had been raised to take pride in her noble status. She continued, insisting that nobles were bound to protect the citizens beneath them and uphold the law as an example to others. The boy asked if she was willing to put herself in danger for the sake of justice. She answered without hesitation, yes. As a noble, she could not look away. She laid out her plan. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, another girl reacted with shock upon learning that Arcus had taken the case. A companion noted how deeply she trusted him, since everyone else avoided going near his room. She replied simply that she knew it would be safe with him. The two shared a lighter moment, teasing about how girlish he seemed, before settling into quiet agreement. The peace shattered. Someone snatched at the girl called Lesia, tearing her sleeve as she cried out for her companion to run. Heavy footsteps closed in from behind. A scarred, armored man tensed at the sound of trouble. Nearby, two girls turned in alarm, calling out to Charlotte as a group of rough, armed men advanced into view. Charlotte stepped forward to shield the smaller girl, drawing her weapon and standing her ground as the thugs and armored guards closed in from every side, the confrontation now impossible to avoid. Charlotte stood firm and demanded the men identify themselves. The lead thug only grinned, telling the girls they were coming with them. One of the men lunged and grabbed for Lesia, who cried out in fright. Charlotte cut him off before he could reach her, her blade flashing between them. She struck him down with a clean slash, and he crumpled, howling in pain. A second attacker charged in immediately, furious. He stomped forward to strike, but Charlotte pulled Lesia out of harm's way just in time. She rounded on the group, demanding to know if they would truly raise their weapons against the children of noblemen. One of the thugs only smirked in response. She asked whether someone had sent them, recognizing who she and Lesia were. Getting no real answer, she decided it didn't matter and prepared to fight. Another man roared and swung down at her with his blade. She met the attack head, and her sword catching his without hesitation, declaring her response would be the same, regardless of who they were. As their blades locked, she revealed the secret behind her unnatural composure, a gift that let her read her opponent's next move before it came. She named it foresight. Her expression hardened. It wasn't that she refused to lose, she simply could not afford to. The largest of the men, a scarred and heavily built brute, lowered his blade and told her he'd prefer she just put her sword away, remarking on how fierce she was for someone her size. She sized him up, calling him the leader, and wondered aloud whether beating him down would reveal who had sent them. He smirked back, admitting she might be right, and noted she seemed to already have a plan forming. Without warning, he surged forward, and the fight erupted around her in a blur of motion. She darted past his guard, weaving through the air with practiced speed. He caught her off guard from behind with brute force, driving her forward and declaring he had her. She twisted free just in time, their blades clashing again as she narrowly avoided his grip. He swung again, forcing her back, his massive frame closing the distance. Her eyes went wide as she realized his true speed. He raised his weapon, roaring that she could not win, but her foresight had already shown her the outcome his strike would miss, leaving her exactly one opening to end the fight. The brute's grin faded when he saw the blow coming, and he could only grunt in surprise as her blade found its mark. He complimented her through the pain, calling her a smart girl. He acknowledged her strategy had been a wise move, gripping his wound. Charlotte, exhausted, turned to Lesia with quiet regret, hoping the girl would have at least escaped by now. Lesia asked what would happen if she hadn't. Charlotte answered that they would simply wait for their chance to flee. Lesia clenched her hands together, declaring she would do what a noble child must if the worst came to pass. In the darkness that followed, she was heard crying out for her brother, frightened and alone. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Arcus received an unexpected letter addressed to him. He examined it, noting how well dressed the messengers who delivered it had been. A maid appeared, mentioning that a servant not even Noah recognized had ensured it reached him. Arcus wondered aloud who could have sent it. Just then, another servant burst in, cursing under his breath as he asked for Arcus. The maid, confused, asked where Lesia had gone, saying she'd been out for the afternoon. The boy's expression turned to alarm as he delivered the news. Lesia had been kidnapped. A servant's note arrives at the estate, its message blunt and threatening: bring the ledger to the plaza, by the slums, or 2 people die. Crabe reads it with quiet unease. Noah slips out from under a bed, holding something Lesia had taken from a servant at a party. Crabe identifies the case as proof of Gaston's corruption. His expression tightens as he murmurs Arcus's name, already sensing where this is heading. Startled that the Marquis found out about the hidden evidence at all. Arcus, catching the tension, asks pointedly whether something dangerous was kept from him. Crabe reasons it through. Since the culprits suspect Lesia is involved, something must have already happened to the servant who first had the ledger. Arcus's anger flares at the thought of Lesia being dragged into this, his fist slamming down in frustration. Slumped in his chair, Arcus admits he can't believe anyone would go so far as to kill a viscount's daughter. Arcus tells Crabe to inform his uncle instead of his parents. Crabe agrees that someone should be told the full situation. Crabe reasons that the uncle holds more authority than Joshua, and involving him directly would avoid stirring up further trouble. Crabe voices doubt that the letter was written in good faith. Noah, resolute, states plainly that he intends to go to the plaza himself. Noah raises his fist, declaring his plan: let himself get caught, since no one would expect a magician, then escape together with Lesia and the other hostage. Arcus lays out the plan further while he stalls for time. Crabe is to locate exactly where Lesia is being held inside Gaston's estate. Crabe presses further, noting that Arcus will make him go through with this. Regardless, Arcus just grins and asks if he can pull it off. Crane complains of an oncoming headache, and Arcus fires back that he isn't allowed to back out now, grinning through the exchange. Crane confirms he can keep Gaston from storming in without knowing Lesia's location. Once she is found, he is to have Crabe carry out his part of the plan. Alone for a moment, Arcus admits his priority right now is rescuing Lesia, though he knows that alone won't solve everything. Elsewhere, a man wonders what the servant was really doing, questioning whether the evidence gathered was solid enough to bring Gaston down. The ledger sits ominously in shadow as someone questions why it was given to Lesia at all, calling it a reckless move. Crane, uneasy, admits he has a bad feeling about the whole situation. Crane notes dryly that Noah knows how to keep a servant occupied. Noah, shifting focus, tells him there is something else he needs looked into. Arcus arrives at the deserted plaza, case in hand, taking in the abandoned buildings and wreckage. Footsteps sound behind him, and a voice greets him, so he came after all. A group of mercenaries corners a young boy on the street. Their leader, a scarred and heavily built man with a sword across his back, asks bluntly if he is Arcus Raytheft. Arcus confirms it. Arcus studies the men closely. Their armor is mismatched, but their bearing is too disciplined for ordinary thugs. He wonders quietly if they are mercenaries. He tries to stand his ground and refuses to go anywhere with them. The leader cuts him off with a flat order: follow us. The men mock him, laughing at the idea of him playing swordsman. Arcus, gripping his blade with shaking hands, demands to know where his sister is and orders them to give her back. His swing goes wide and clumsy, the blade slipping from his grip entirely. The mercenaries jeer, calling him just some kid. While Arcus breaks down crying that he wishes he could use magic, he snaps back at them, furious that even mercenaries have heard the rumors about him. The men pile on, listing everything he supposedly fails at: athletics, study, and magic, adding that he doesn't even look like a boy. Arcus stays silent, absorbing each jab. He lunges forward, screaming for his sister back, stammering out a fake fire spell. Internally, he reminds himself to keep up the act, and a small object pops out from his sleeve unnoticed. The leader hoists him up by the collar, remarking that the rumors were true. After all, Arcus, dangling, admits to himself that pretending to be pathetic still stings. Shoved into a cart, Arcus checks something hidden on him. Realizing this must be what the men were really after, outside, the wagon sits ready in the darkening town square. Arcus reveals he swapped the real documents for random papers, confident the illiterate mercenaries can't read them. One of the men, letters in hand, mutters that he can't tell what they say. The men decide they're probably fine and move on. Arcus exhales in relief, noting to himself that the first stage of his plan is clear as the wagon rattles down the road. The wagon arrives at a lavish mansion at night. Arcus silently promises his sister Lycia that he'll reach her soon, gazing up at the grand estate ahead. Inside, the mercenaries report back to their employer, confirming they've brought the boy. He recoils slightly in disgust at the sight of Arcus. The man introduces himself as Lord Gaston. Arcus confirms his own identity, sizing up the smug noble seated before him. Arcus demands his sister's release. Gaston ignores the plea, extending a hand and insisting the ledger comes first. Gaston reminds him that his letter specifically requested the real documents, then holds up the papers. Arcus handed over, declaring flatly that this isn't what he asked for. Arcus stammers an excuse, claiming an official confiscated the real ledger before he arrived. Gaston smirks, unconvinced, telling him nice try, and pointing out that if the excuse were true, he wouldn't have bothered showing up at all. Gaston presses further, asking if anyone else knows the truth. Arcus answers no, then clenches his jaw and admits he left the real evidence back home. Gaston flatly refuses to believe him. Arcus pleads again, begging him to let his sister go first, promising the real evidence the moment she is free. Gaston laces his fingers together, smiling coldly. He tells the boy this is his own fault, that trying to fool him once already cost his second chance, and that he needs proof of what Arcus actually has before trusting another word. Gaston waves the guard over, ordering him to take the boy away since he has no more use for him. Arcus stiffens in dread, bracing for the worst, until Gaston adds one more instruction: put him with the girls. Inside, Lycia rejoices in secret, hugging herself and cheering silently that she'll be kept safe with her brother nearby, already plotting to wait for the coast to clear before blasting her way out with magic. But Gaston stops the guard mid-motion. Arcus flinches, startled, as the order changes: take him to the holy tower instead, just in case. The guard hesitates, reminding Gaston of the boy's well-known lack of skill. Gaston brushes it off, noting that Arcus comes from a martial family, so caution costs nothing. Leaning close, Gaston murmurs that no one can be sure the boy's weakness isn't simply an act. Arcus freezes, sweat breaking out, realizing how close the man is to seeing through him. The guard obeys, dragging Arcus off toward the tower. Gaston, unmoved, silences any further argument with a curt "hm. Outside, the mansion looms under a gray sky as Gaston's men lay out their plan, observe quietly while the Ray Theft household panics over both missing children. Since the real evidence is locked away back at their estate, Gaston's expression darkens as the topic shifts. A subordinate asks nervously what is to be done about the girls. Gaston answers without hesitation, ordering them disposed of as originally planned. Arcus overhears, his eyes going wide with horror. He explodes, demanding if Gaston has lost his mind, pointing out that the Viscount is still a nobleman and Lycia his daughter. Gaston merely smirks, dismissing the objection, saying it is not unusual for noble children to vanish, and asking if Arcus really thinks anyone will believe otherwise. Arcus stammers, asking how he can be so confident. Gaston raises a hand casually, explaining it will be simple enough to erase the tracks. Grinning wide, Gaston declares that the world runs on money, and money is power enough to bury any wrongdoing. He calls it the lubricant of society, something that can twist even sincerity into whatever shape he wants. Arcus glares, snapping back that Gaston seems to think money can solve everything. Furious, Arcus shouts that he can't believe the audacity of it, his composure cracking. The guard clamps a hand over him, telling him not to squirm as Arcus struggles weakly against the grip. Gaston asks the guard if he has ever met a truly terrifying child. The guard admits he hasn't, but Gaston says quietly that he has. His mind drifts to a memory of the prince, Liner's prince, whispered to be the most gifted magician the kingdom has ever produced. The guard shakes his head, insisting the royal family isn't like ordinary people. Gaston agrees, admitting he has only heard how impressive they are secondhand. His memory sharpens on the image of the prince, crowned in an ornate headdress and shadowed visor, a figure Gaston brands as inhuman, a leader belonging to a separate kind entirely. Arcus's defiant glare surfaces in his mind, next. The boy having played weak, without ever showing real fear of him. The guard asks where all this is coming from. Gaston admits, it wasn't like speaking to a child at all. Something about Arcus reminded him unmistakably of the prince. Back at the tower, the escorting knight shakes Arcus awake, announcing they've arrived. Arcus stirs groggily, blinking up in confusion. He stares up at the massive structure looming above him, muttering that escape from a place like this is supposed to be impossible. The holy tower stretches into the clouds. A lone knight patrols the pale corridor inside, spear in hand, footsteps echoing through the empty stone hallway. Deeper in, a disheveled prisoner named Gwari lounges lazily in his cell. A knight passing outside pauses, asking why he is still locked up in there. Gwari shrugs it off, saying he has got nowhere else to go anyway. The knight reminds him his sentence ended long ago. Grinning, Gwari jokes that the room service is simply too good to leave, praising how spotlessly clean his cell is kept. Slouched against the wall with a crooked smile, Gwari suddenly looks up and calls out, asking who is this fresh face wandering in. He grins wider, chuckling softly to himself as the scene closes, marked to be continued.